You know, I learned how to play that chord. It was at the end of an Extreme song, and I don't remember. Yes. Yeah. Gosh, I don't remember the name of it, but it ends with that chord. And ever since then, whenever I'm playing a song in the key of E, and the song ends, I go to that sound, which is like an add 9.
It's a great chord.
Yeah, I dig it.
Love it. Hey, Steve, thanks for being here.
Absolutely.
You're an amazing guy.
And so are you.
Yeah, I'm just here to ask questions and get answers, sir. Hey, guys, thanks for being here. Really appreciate it. This is the Acoustic Guitar Workshop, brought to you by GuitarZoom.com. If you'd like to learn some acoustic guitar, you can keep watching. If you want to learn it even faster, you can go to the old guitarzoom.com and check out Steve's acoustic guitar course by Steve Stine. It's available now, and it's new, and it's amazing. And let's learn some acoustic guitar stuff, guys. If you want to ask questions, please put them in the chat box or the comments, wherever you're watching this. Make sure you subscribe and hit the notify button so you can get notified of when the next one is coming. We're going to do several of these for you. And they'll all be saved on the YouTube channel, so you can go back and watch them. We'll put them in a nice playlist for you called the Acoustic Guitar Workshop. So today, we're going to be talking about getting creative with chords on the old acoustic guitar.
Yes.
Take it away, sir.
We are.
We are ready for learning.
All right, perfect. Well, when I first started learning chords, like a lot of people, learn how to play D and A and G. And again, all very practical and very important chords to learn on the guitar. But there's a few things that, and there's a million conversations we could have about creative chords, but what I want to do is just get you to start thinking a little bit again outside the box. So the first thing to do is we're just going to look at, let me grab that there so I can change this. We're going to look at like adding on and subtracting fingers, if you think of it that way. So for instance, if I take this D chord right here, what I can do is I can add on my pinky somewhere and see what it sounds like. Or if I was on a C chord, I've got my pinky available and I could put it somewhere and see what it sounds like. Or, whatever. If I'm on an A chord, again, I've got a pinky available. So when I was younger and exploring this stuff, I didn't always have like someone to tell me what was right and wrong. I just explored sounds. And that was really fun for me to just kind of explore things. So one thing before we even get started in this, I want you to understand is I'm going to give you a couple of different insights today on some unique things that you could do with your chords that you may not have thought about before. So one is adding a finger on somewhere on the guitar and thinking about what it sounds like and whether or not you like that sound. Now, if we go back to this D chord, a more common place to put this pinky would be on the 3rd fret of the 1st string, right here. And you get a typical kind of sound that's called sus4. It makes us a D sus4. And again, don't worry about what that means. But so if I put that pinky down and then I take it off, it comes back and it feels like home when I hit that D chord. Okay? And you hear that in like in Free Fallin', you hear that kind of sound, okay? And that's a great place to put that, okay? When I was a kid, it sounded too much like everything else. So that's when I would try and put it somewhere else. I would move it a half step up and explore that sound. You see, and I would try and come up with things that were a little more unusual sounding, just because that's what I was always trying to do. That was kind of the journey that I was on. So what I'm showing you right there is that just simply by putting your pinky down, you get a different kind of sound. One is more of a comforting sound, I suppose you could call it. And the other one's a bit more dissonant. totally reminds me of something like Alice in Chains would do, though. You know what I mean? It's just, I just love that kind of sound. So I never let my theory or my logic get in the way of my creativity. If I came up with something that I liked, I just liked it. And it didn't have to fit in a key, and it didn't have to make, fit all the parameters of whatever. If I liked it, I frickin' used it and made something with it. So that's one thing I want you to think about, is never forget your creative side of guitar playing, or whatever your musical motivation is. It doesn't always have to fit in a box. Okay? So now the next thing I could do with this D chord, and I'll show you some other chords as we keep going here, but I could take a finger off. So in this case, what I could do is I could take off my middle finger, and I get what's called a D sus2. And if I combine that with the D sus4, and I always really dug that, because when I first started learning how to play chords meant chord changes. Like D went to C, and C went to G, or whatever it might be. And I don't remember again where this happened, but when I started learning this chord creativity that I'm showing you right now, it meant I could stay on the chord longer, just change the voicing of that chord, and it made its own melody. It made something else happen. But it didn't require block movements, if you will. Like I didn't have to move to A, and then D, and then G, and then C. I didn't have to do this. I could stay in one place. Or whatever it might be. And all of a sudden my song had this melody that existed over whatever chord, in this case the D chord. So learning to take fingers off and add them on, and you can explore all kinds of things, but again, don't get wrapped up in every finger should be able to be lifted off or what. You can explore them, but ultimately what you're going to do is find sounds that you really like. Like if I was doing the D, another one. And as soon as I do that, I think, my name's John, live better more. It has that kind of sound to it. And what I'm doing there is I'm taking the first finger off, and I'm doing what's called a Hammeron. So I'm smacking my finger back down onto the note that makes the D chord. So I'm making this G, that's becoming an A there. I gotta remember how this goes. I just had to get that out of my system, I'm sorry, but...
Sounds great.
Yeah, but again, it's embellishment, right? I'm taking the D chord and I'm making, what is the name of that song again?
I don't know.
Copperhead Road. There we go. Copperhead Road. That's what it is. So yeah, Copperhead Road by Steve Earle. Okay? So what I'm doing there, as you can see, I'm adding in this finger. And then I actually went over here and I added my pinky on the 4th fret of the 3rd string there. See that? So I'm making a melody now on the top side of that chord. See? So there's a lot of really fun things that you can do by simply removing fingers and adding them back on. C chord. Now what I'm doing is I'm doing that on the 2nd string. So I'm adding my pinky on. And then taking that off. And it's going to give me a different kind of sound. You see? And then what I would do is I'd go to A minor. You see, so I could just explore these different sounds by adding and removing different fingers. Now, if you make a chord that doesn't, like a G, you use all 4 fingers, you don't really have a lot that you can move around, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's going to bring me to the second conversation we're going to have in just a second here, but I want to see if you have any questions or anything.
No, I mean, I think this is super cool. Sometimes we get caught up on these terms of like, well, is it a D sus chord? Is it a chord embellishment? Like, I think the point that I'm getting from this is that you're really encouraging them to explore the different sounds by either adding notes or taking notes away.
Yeah, I mean, the most important thing to always remember from my perspective of being a guitar player and growing up the way I did was music is about sound. It's not about logic, because if there was logic, we wouldn't have rock and roll in the first place. Rock and roll is based on theory that doesn't make any sense, which is blues and dominant 7th chords and all this sort of thing. So because I grew up the way I did, music was always more based on, you know, if I was playing it was a movement thing. Like, I could see what they were doing and I could hear what they were doing, but I never really sat and went, well, I've got to define all this, and if that doesn't fit, I got to call Iron Maiden and tell them that they can't do that anymore. It never worked that way for me. My brain never worked that way. So where I could see, if you grew up with a different mentality of music, how you'd go. That's, as a matter of fact, here's a great little story. When I started teaching at NDSU, one of the reasons I started teaching over there is they wanted a different musical perspective. And what happened was, a lot of my students that would take my classes over at the college were other musicians that were majoring in other instruments, but they wanted to see the uniqueness of the fretboard. Because if you play trumpet or you play tuba or you play saxophone or whatever, your world isn't based on visualization, right? And shapes. And so it was really interesting for a lot of them to take the class and go, wow, that's really unique how I'm not thinking about theory. I'm more thinking about the way it looks and the way it sounds on the fretboard. And a prime example of that, I'll move into my second conversation here.
By the way, guys, NDSU is North Dakota State University. That's where Steve was the professor of modern guitar studies there.
That's right. That's right. So here's a prime easy example, like how I could take a C chord and move it up. And obviously, by moving it up a whole step, it's becoming a D of some sort, because I went from C 2 frets higher, it becomes a D. But it's not this D, it's a different voicing of D, because I'm just taking the notes that I'm pressing on and moving them up, which means the other strings are still open. And you get this really kind of unique sound by doing things like that. You know, I can take my D chord, like, again, you're going to hear Extreme, but the band Extreme, but, you know, like Jimmy Page would do this stuff all the time. Let's move it up a half step. See? So I could just kind of explore moving that D chord around and getting all these unique sounds. And that was just really fun for me. Like, I would take the E chord and move it up to the 9th and 8th frets, which is technically a B, but I'm not playing B in the bass. See, I'm just literally taking the E chord shape. And then if I move it down a whole step, it becomes A of sorts. But I've got this great B tone or E tonality happening. F sharp minor, but keep E in the bass. And you just come up with, again, really unique and interesting sounds with chords that you already know, open chords. Now, again, I'm not saying this is easy and it doesn't require some practice. You know what it requires is it requires your time and it requires patience. because you just have to look around. And I can't give you all the answers of, well, this is what you have to do and don't do this. It's all relative to what kind of... And Dan and I were actually talking about Alice in Chains earlier, so I'm kind of on that kick right now in my brain, because Alice in Chains, like those guys would write chord progressions that were really kind of ugly sounding, oftentimes using what we're talking about right now. Not always, but it fit the kind of music that they were playing. So somebody else might listen to that and go, "Ooh, you can't do that," and somebody else comes along and goes, "Man, that is exactly the kind of sound I was looking for." So you can't dismiss it because it does or doesn't fit into a box. It all depends on what you like. I'm just saying, for me as a guitar player, when I learned this stuff, it was really cool because I knew I didn't at that time. Again, I'm okay with all kinds of different styles of music, but at that time I didn't want just a regular G and C and D, because it seemed like all the music I was listening to, they were trying to be more interesting than that. So that's when I started going, well, how can I move things around? Like, what could I do? And I would just explore different kinds of sounds and see what kind of things I could come up with. You see? And just kind of look around and go, okay, well, that's not going to work, so let's try something else. And I'd move it down. You see, and then if all of a sudden I put a bass behind there that's going, all of a sudden that kind of solidifies that bass sound. So now as a guitar player, I don't have to worry about trying to sustain that. That bass could possibly do that.
Dude, that's amazing.
Yeah, it's so much fun. And when you start thinking about that way, about music that way, you start being able to kind of connect more with a lot of the, like, for me, with the stuff that I listen to, a lot of the players that I listen to, this is the way they were thinking about the guitar. It wasn't just, G, C, and D gives me the Eagles, and that's fine. I love the Eagles, right? But this gives me something that's a little bit different than that. And that's where, like, I remember the first time learning, like Rooster by Alice in Chains. Again, I'm picking on Alice in Chains, but it was a bar chord, but then they take the bar off. And then they moved up to A as a bar chord, then they took the bar chord off. And that's it. Again, it's a shape thing. And we can define it as a million things, but I guarantee you when Jerry Cantrell's writing that, he's just going, "Oh, I'll take the bar off and see what it sounds like." Well, that's kind of cool. And you put them together, and now you've got this continuity. It's kind of like... like Rush, taking this E and then doing a bar chord, but you're only playing the top part of the bar and you're leaving the bottom strings open. You get these really kind of neat sounds by doing that. So that's what I want you to be thinking about in this chord creativity little discussion that Dan and I are having, is how you can, again, for me, songs are a great place to start learning how to do this, because I learn a song and go, "Oh, I've never done that before. That's kind of unique." And I'll figure out how I can use that in my playing.
It's super cool, dude. All this stuff's amazing. I forget about how just unique acoustic guitar can be just by moving like one note off of a string, or taking an A shape and playing an E at the bottom of it, or whatever the case.
Yeah, I'm going to show you something, Dan. I don't know if anybody's going to get it. It depends on how old you are. But I wrote a song with a buddy of mine. It was written for my daughter when she was born, and it was called "To Sing a Lullaby." And the beginning starts with this. Okay? And what happens there is, it's one of my favorite chord progressions from the 70s, where you'd play a major chord, then you play a major 7, and then a dominant 7. And it always reminds me of like bread or something. There's I can't remember what song it is. If a picture to fall, I can't remember what it is, but there's a ton of songs from the 70s that would do that. Now, I wasn't a big kind of AM radio 70s guy, but that was the chord progression, and for some reason it always just really kind of tugged at my heart because I just love the sound of that. So when I don't know what key it was in, I don't know anything, but that chord progression has always stuck with me. Now, the second part of that, it goes to D. And here comes my Beatles. Right here. So right there what happens is I go to a D major chord and then I follow with a D minor chord, which I would hear the Beatles do all the time. So in that particular song, I'm using both D major and D minor in the same chord progression. So getting creative with your chords and thinking differently about the way that you approach your songwriting. And when I say songwriting, I don't mean you have to be some professional. You just got to get in there and start getting dirty. You just got to try some different things.
So cool, dude. I love it. Man, this has been a fun workshop, and it's just fun to hear you play and demonstrate all these different ideas because it's inspirational. It's inspirational to me, and it's inspirational to everybody watching. Guys, if you've got the acoustic guitar like bug and you want to really go deep into this stuff, Steve's created a course for you. It's called Acoustic Guitar by Steve Stine. It's available at guitarzoom.com. And he goes a deep dive into all of these getting creative with chords, these hammer-ons, the pull-offs, the movable chord shapes, strumming patterns, finger patterns. It's all there for you in his new course called Acoustic Guitar. You can go to the homepage there at guitarzoom.com. And if there's not on the homepage, just click on the shop button and it'll take you over to all of the courses that we have available for you there. Steve, this has been fantastic. Is there anything else that you want to cover, my friend?
No, I think that's more than enough. Again, I always think with these things, it's nice to get people to just think a little bit differently about their practice approach, that everything doesn't just have to be a routine. Like you can really enjoy yourself and explore things on the fretboard. And I think this is a good thing for them to try.
Me too. It's been fantastic, guys. If you enjoyed this, please subscribe and click the old notify button so you can be notified of when we do another one of these. We will save all of these workshops for you there on the Steve Stine YouTube channel or the GuitarZoom YouTube channel. We also have the GuitarZoom Songs channel where we just focus on playing fun songs and learning how to play some songs, just get the basic chords down and strumming patterns so you can kind of chug along with it. Also, if you are not, if you're a podcast person, you enjoy listening to podcasts, we have a new podcast and you can check that out. It's called the Steve Stine Podcast, very cleverly named. It's available over there on iTunes and wherever else you listen to podcasts. But the new course is called Acoustic Guitar. It's by Steve Stine. Steve, thank you for putting it together for us. I know people are going to love it, and thank you for being here. And thank you to all of you for being here. Appreciate you very much. We'll see you in the next session.
Yep. Take care, everybody. Talk to you soon.
My friend. Thanks.